Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology Debunking Mythology. Sat means truth, Logos means a study or science, Sattology means a science of truth or study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means a science of fake lie imagination or study of fake lie imagination. If you want to check out Sattology, there is sattology.org, sattology.com, everydaychan.com, bolo.live, and also YouTube channel is Sattology. You can search over there. Plus, you can search Sattology on Amazon. So you can see that all these titles, videos, everything you'll see there. And I have a very, very special guest today, which we all meet next week, but he's special. He's a Rishi, Muni, researcher, and he produces his own finding. And if you have questions, you can ask him directly. And he's available. His books are very famous. So without delay, let us welcome Shri Nilesh Nilkant Oak.
Namaskar Aditya ji, happy to be back on your show.
It's our show now. So when we talk about, we'll slightly Vartak Oak Samhita.
Yeah, I know you were going to say that. Vartak Oak Samvat. Yes, it is going to become the foundation for the 21st century and many centuries to come. The foundation for the Indian calendar. Now, in all fairness, I mean, humorously, it's perfectly okay to say Vartak Oak Samvat, but it is actually the mercy of a Vasudev. Okay, Vasudev has encoded such a precious knowledge in the Mahabharata, and of course, other texts, but Mahabharata mainly, Pancham Veda. It's unparalleled. And so it is a Mahabharata Samvat. But for bringing it to our attention, people's attention, both Vartak and Oak, Dr. Vartak and Dr. No can take a credit. So Vartak Oak Samvat.
It's such an irony that India is the source of knowledge from Veda. And we are asking the West for validation. It's such a shame on us, on everything, and including weapons. Mm-hmm. It all originates from philosophy and then comes to physical things. Mm-hmm. And now most of the Indians, we are worried now, thanks to Atmanirbharta movement by the current Prime Minister, that it is slightly getting more now focusing on ourselves and focusing on our issues or Indian issues, even Indian American issues. But there is a West has a very condescending attitude. They want to judge what is right or wrong without checking on themselves. So my question to you is, this identity crisis that we are facing on multiple fronts, and we can blame on Max Muller, but we have not done anything in the last 75 years to remove it. We have continued that fallacy. So how do we work on the removing this identity crisis?
Okay. Great question. Let's understand what is our identity before we get into a crisis. If you consider the identity of Indian civilization, the Dharma civilization, it's three. The foundations are three. And today I'm going to show you a lot of threes, by the way. The tripod I'm going to show you, the side table with the three legs I'm going to show you. But the three, India, I mean, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, you see that. The three foundations of a Indian civilization, Dharma civilization, let's start with where it ought to begin. Is the absolute moral standards, okay, which is just a simple, people say, oh, what are those? Well, that's our problem. I'm going to come to that. People don't know what they are. People can read Bhagavad Gita and get that in 16th chapter, the Daivi Pravrutti, Daivi Sampada. But that is what? Absolute moral standard, which is what? Ahimsa, Satyamasteya, Akama, Krodha, Lobhata. Those are the absolute moral standards. Because there is a very subtle thought that goes into it. The second one is endurance in conduct. Okay, so it's like a Sahishnuta, having that trust that your work, your Swadharma is going to give you the best path for your progress. Okay, so endurance in conduct. And the third one is freedom of thought. what has happened is the first absolute moral principles is lost. It's people not understood. Even when they see it, they have this interpretation, like the ahimsa, the way it was understood in a very biased attitude, like Gandhiji, and so very it got twisted. But you just don't blame Gandhiji. Many people have destroyed it. Even to this day, the so-called swamis and all are also doing it. Then the endurance in conduct. You will find when I go give lectures, people will ask questions, very typical questions time and time again. By Kali Yuga, what is about Kali Yuga? What about the textbooks? And what are we doing about digging about the Dwarka? And why are we not having these? And why we don't have this evidence? All of these, how are you going to get this? How are you going to get textbooks changed? Through endurance in conduct. You, the person who is asking that question, person who is showing some concern, pretentious or otherwise, has to do something about it. A pretentious individual will not do anything, will only ask questions. So that's the second part. And the third part is freedom of thought. Now, that people try to do. The problem is the freedom of thought assumes that you know how to think. Remember, we did one episode on how to think, and that seems to be going viral, in different places through different mediums, not just YouTube. So how to think? You need to know you need to know how to think. So Aditya, what happens is this: in Jnaneshwari, the 13th century Santa Jnaneshwar Maharaj, it's a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. Shankaracharya, as I've said, is the best commentary. The modern Shankaracharya, as I've said, it's the best commentary. That by itself may not carry weight one way or the other, but it is a point of view. I consider it very best. Okay, but of course, even the disciples of Jnaneshwara did even better. I mean, that's also very interesting. That's how you go in the tradition of Guru Shishya Parajay, which is what I'm going to show you a demonstration today with that Vartak Ok Samvat, Vas, something like that. But what he says at the end of the whole commentary on Bhagavad Gita, now he's asking something, a prasad in return, pasayadan. Now he's asking from his guru, and in the one statement he says, "Jose vanchila tote laho." Whoever wants whatever, let that person have it. Now, if you just take this statement, it can lead to disaster. But before that, he is saying what kind of condition should be there as a sustainable condition on the earth, among the human beings, among the living entities. And in that context, Jose Vanchila Tote Laho, Pranizata, all the living entities, let them have what they desire. But already there is a perfect background that he's saying, which is of what? Absolute moral standards, endurance in conduct, because nobody wants to take anything for free. Okay. And then freedom of thought, then let them have what they desire, because the structure is there. So to answer your question, the crisis that we have is because the civilizational crisis is because of the lack of understanding of civilizational ethos, and also because of the lack of behaving according to those civilizational ethos.
The one of the things which comes to the attention nowadays is, like I was speaking to someone on the Constitution of India. Now, the Constitution of the world was given by Nivritti, which is grossly misunderstood, because the Varna are based on work, not by birth, which Manu says it very clearly. So now the question comes in. Is the Constitution of India, which is derived from American Constitution and British Constitution, by the way, British don't have a constitution, they have only one paper, and that too is not written, it's verbal. Common sense is the Constitution of UK, therefore they have no fixed path. So Constitution is for the colonies, not for the original nation. That's why Britain doesn't have a constitution.
Yeah.
But India, Constitution is required so that the others are educated. India had a constitution. Manusmriti was a constitution. So without an identity, how can a nation progress further? Like including arms, weapons, development. And now when India is seeing the sanctions, that how sanctions can destroy a country. And now they're suddenly the eyes are opened up that the dollar reserves are not enough, because and Russia is saved because they don't maintain dollar currency. They converted everything into gold. They own the entire $600 billion in gold. But India doesn't have that. Indian currency is stored in the Western bodies. So how does identity actually insecures a nation, makes a nation more vulnerable to attacks? What do you have to say on that? And we'll start your presentation.
Yeah, I mean, you summarized it very well. I don't need to add anything. You mentioned Manusmriti as the India's constitution, or should have been India's constitution. And it's important to mention for the benefit of people that Manusmriti is like, depending on the place, time, and circumstances, you make modifications. Sanatano Nitya Nutana. In the line of Manu, there was a king Mandata.
That's right.
Great king. I mean, in a Ikshwaku dynasty, same as Bhagwan Ram. I mean, Bhagwan Ram came long after. So Mandata is long before. The reason I just mentioned Mandata because of the British like having a one piece of paper, you were saying. Because our, worldwide people, or at least let's talk about Indians, because we're talking of Indians' crisis, they are not aware that Mandata had a kingdom. He had an influence around the world in such a way that sun never set. That's what Vishnu Puran says. Right. Sun never set. But we think only, the one kingdom that I'm aware of is United Kingdom, who had some time, by torturing and colonizing people, they could have such a land under their control that the sun never set, somewhere it is there. But Mandata's description is given, and we don't know exactly the time of Mandata, but we definitely know it's that long time before 14,000 years, because 14,000 years is the time of Ramayana. So today what I want to do, Aditya-ji, is last time, and we will call this part 2. We will figure it out how to do this, and we might have to do part 3. But how does the growth of knowledge takes place? And we have to, within our tradition, like if you have to work on the Indian identity crisis, we have to educate people. In the process, we are going to educate non-Indians also. I mean, this is about humanity, right? This is about humanity. It's not specific to this. But the crisis of Indians is because of the reason that I'm going to show you today. I'm going to mention in some ways. Again, I'm going to select my favorite topic, but that's because, I don't have to give a reason, right? It's my favorite topic. So that's enough. That's good. That's good enough. This is a presentation I gave at the seminar last week, I think. This was the topic, In Search of Veracity of Krishna and Mahabharata. Now think of it. This is how it is, even the topic name is formulated, In Search of Veracity, as if like we are still searching. Now the spirit is correct, because Sanatano Nitya Nutana. But because our people are ignorant, they think in search, meaning you have not figured out yet. Okay. So no, actually we have figured it out. Because Vasudev has given such a impressive evidence in our ancient text, and in the context of Mahabharata, the Mahabharata text itself, Harivamsha, Bhagavad Puran, and so on. But you need Vijnana Buddhi, you need Tarka Shastra, you need Tantra Yukti and Shraddha to figure this out. You're going to find the situation, Aditya-ji, of Indic researchers, and I'm talking of pro-Indic researchers. Forget the anti-India. I mean, that's a disaster. Disasters on multiple counts. They are totally agenda-driven, okay, of a very low character and all of that. But even the pro-Indic researchers, at least their stance, the public stance is as if they are pro-Indic. It's such a pathetic state. And that's why we are into this crisis. So I'm not saying only the Mahabharata researchers, but they contribute to this whole Indian crisis. So because the seminar had used the word veracity, I wanted to define it first, because that is the style, modus operandi, you can say, of all Indian text. Before using the word, they explain it. If something is recorded in chronicles, and if you can show it to be true independently, that's very important. Not just like somebody said it, or that must be true. No, that's utter nonsense. The person has no knowledge of Darshan Shastra. If you can show it to be true independently, and therefore we talk about the Atma Pratiti, Guru Pratiti, Shastra Pratiti, why not just Atma Pratiti? Why not just Guru Pratiti? Or why not just Shastra Pratiti? Because in interpreting Shastra, we can make mistakes too, right? So therefore, the triangulation of this, Atma Pratiti, Guru Pratiti, Shastra Pratiti, similarly, that's what we mean by independently. But in this case, we are talking in a scientific fashion, empirical one. Then we have veracity. Now, everywhere else, if you say in Abrahamic traditions or many other isms like communisms, you cannot doubt the person who initiated. Like, you cannot say much about the Karl Marx, or whatever that ism is. You cannot say it. It is only the Dharma civilization, and Dharma civilization doesn't mean the Indian civilization, but many of the native civilizations are, if not exactly, they are very, very close to the principles, the three foundational principles that I mentioned: freedom of thought, endurance in conduct, and absolute moral code. The code may even change depending on subject, time, place, circumstances. Okay. The food habits may change, the clothing habits may change, but the basic principle doesn't change. The Dharma civilizations value Samshaya. They also know how to distinguish. I'm talking only philosophical basis. Doesn't mean everyone in India, everyone from India knows that. Actually, more majority don't know. That's why there is a crisis that you are mentioning. Is the importance of Samshaya. And this is not the Samshaya of a mind, the one that Krishna is referring to in a Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, Adnyascha ashraddha dhanascha samshayatma vinashyati. Okay, nase jnana, nase shraddha, samshaye nasala pura. Okay, that is the Marathi translation of that particular line. No knowledge, no conviction, no trust. Okay, and totally full of samshay. The person's life is destroyed. There was at that seminar, there was a presenter before me. And do you know what he did? And I'll leave you to guess the individual. I think they have a group on a Telegram or something. And through that, they do just all kinds of crazy campaigning. And that's how they find a way to get everywhere, wherever I present. So I like that, the guy is so obsessed with me that he has to be present. So he found his way. And whatever 30 minutes, whatever he talked, I don't understand much of what he says. The first 15 minutes, he said something, or whatever the subject he pretended to speak on. And the remaining 15 minutes, I'm very happy to tell you, he was my free marketing guy. He was blaspheming Nilesh Oak for the remaining 15 minutes. Okay, so I'll leave it to you for your imagination. The point I'm saying is the Samshaya is good. So Samshaya of a mind is very bad. It's going to lead to disaster. But Samshaya of a buddhi is good because it all begins with a doubt. And I'm just going to give you an example, again, nothing new. But look at these four individuals, okay? Panini, the grammarian; Kalidas, the great writer, drama writer and whatnot. Kavya, right? Then Bhagwan Sri Krishna, and take Alexander. If you ask, our audience today, but if you ask like people in general, okay, so do you think Panini, of course, those assuming they know who Panini is, like, hey, do you think Panini really existed? And people say, yeah, is that a question? If they know about Panini, hey, I know this Panini's book by heart and all that. The grammarians who are many times, unfortunately, just stuck in grammar and they don't know anything outside. Kalidas, amazing Kavya, Shakuntala, Raghuvamsha, people know that. Did Kalidas really exist? And people will say, how come he's going to write about that? Of course he existed. Alexander, I'll skip Krishna for a second. Of course, yeah. Didn't he come here and all blah, 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 and something like this? Alexander the Great, do you mean? But if you actually go looking for independent, provable evidence, do you know what you find? Now, this is when these archaeologists, with their utterly nonsensical basis of logical positivism come into the picture. If you ask them what is the evidence, archaeological evidence for Panini, they will change the goalpost right away. They don't want to talk about it because the answer is there is zero archaeological evidence for Panini. There is zero archaeological evidence for Kalidas, and there is a zero archaeological evidence for Alexander. But people have no problem usually accepting him. But if you ask about Krishna, the last one, the one that I skipped, they will say, yeah, who knows? Maybe he was there. Maybe he was not there. This is our crisis. This is our civilizational crisis. Based on what? Based on what basis evidence you accepted Alexander, and based on what evidence or lack of evidence you are rejecting Krishna? They say, yeah, no, he may be there, but I don't know if all the stories about him are true. Well, why only this is the exception to Krishna? That is actually true, or that can be true about any of the characters. That is true about Bill Clinton. That is that is true about all of our current president. That is true about anyone. Like you may hear a certain story, but that may not be the fact. And we don't always have a evidence. But if it comes to independently provable evidence, out of these four personalities that I'm showing, Krishna has the most. Now, immediately, if I say this, Adityaji, people are going to be surprised and shocked. That is our civilizational crisis. For some reason, our crisis has reached such a proportion that if you analyze it logically and scientifically, the popular versions that you see consistently, this seems to be opposite of the reality. Whatever is reality, people tend to believe which is exactly opposite. So what's possibly going on? So, and then I want to get to the Vartak Oak Samvat, and how the growth of knowledge takes place. Since Krishna is way too ancient than others, the four characters that I mentioned, his chronicles seem improbable to our modern sensibilities. And that's where the Samshaya creeps in. But if you actually go start looking for evidence, you know what we are going to find? Only Krishna's chronicles have memories of a phenomenon which are unrefutable in an ordinary language. In scientific language, refutable is what is desired. Refutable, but not refuted. That's what science values. Okay. Unrefutable in ordinary language. They are verifiable. Again, this is ordinary language. In science, there is no verification. It's only validation, corroboration, non-corroboration, falsification. But again, we are talking to people at large. So I'm using the word they are verifiable with sophisticated modern technology. So let's spot the specific Samshaya. Now, because we're talking of Krishna, we will talk about two. Did Krishna exist? Now, if you come on the other side, those people who have done some work, they have done some endurance in conduct, they have done some homework, they have read something, they have the background, understand the background of absolute moral standards, and they have some Shraddha. Also, they have a free thought. Why the open thought is required, I will tell you in a minute. If you ask them, those who are aware, did Krishna exist? They'll say, of course. Did Mahabharata war really happen? Of course. I'm going to skip the next 2, 3. When did it happen? Where did it happen? Yeah, unanimously you'll get agreed location, Kurukshetra. I mean, there will always be few lunatics who will say in Afghanistan and South America. You're always going to find lunatics somewhere, Even at our seminar, they were there, Now, I'll skip the next 2 and go to the next one. Where did Krishna live? Again, you'll get a unanimously agreed location. I'm saying this is from a people who have done some work, some tapasya, some swadhyaya of their own. They will say, yeah, he was born in Mathura, spent his time in Gokul Vrindavan, and then when he was grown up, then he moved to Dwarka and so on. Where did Krishna end his Leela? Just near Dwarka, Prabhasa Kshetra, and now we have a place called Bhalka Kshetra, very, very close to Somnath Mandir in Gujarat. Now, when it comes to when did it happen and what was Krishna's lifespan? Now, I don't think you have many shows on Krishna's lifespan. Actually, you should start doing them, especially those people who claim that they have figured out a year of Mahabharata war. It is worth asking them, what was the Krishna's lifespan? And if they have evidence for it, and do they think it can be built, or they don't have a sufficient evidence? Because the answer is there is a sufficient evidence. So if they say there is not, which means they haven't done their swadhyaya. As to when it happened, like how long we are discussing it, you and me are discussing this for 2+ years. You have many other guests who also claim that they have figured out a year of Mahabharata war, different than mine. Here is a problem: 130 plus estimates going from 7,300 BC through 400 CE. Why is this happening? So that is Samshaya, by the way. So why these exist? Again, because what has happened is a lot more people are passionate about Krishna's history, just like Bhagwan Rama's history. Therefore, everyone wanted to write their version of Ramayana. There is a Tulsi Ramayana, Bhavartha Ramayana, Kamba Ramayana, and many, many other Ramayanas. There are Ramayanas written in Indonesia and Malaysia and Philippines, and every time they made some changes. That's not good. They might have done with their own emotion or whatever the local circumstances to fit it so that people may understand. As a historical sense, it does a damage. but for their individual purpose, it might have done the job. But same thing happened with Krishna's history. Krishna is so popular. I mean, if you look at the, what you say, just like the man of the year kind of thing, if you look at our history of last 20, 30,000 years and look at the popularity worldwide, I'm talking, it will come to Krishna and Rama. Okay. That's a fact. But a lot more people are passionate. That's the reason now. But what it affects is that it has gone through countless transfers between generation, kingdoms, thought schools, ideologues, and wise minds. If you see Ramayana or even Mahabharata that exist in India, but by the time it was modified in the sense it was rewritten with their own local flavor in, say, Indonesia, a lot of things changed. Same thing in Thailand and Burma and Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, and things happen. As the story traveled through millennia, like in time, but also in space, numerous discrepancies were bound to creep in. That's what has happened. Against this background, it is very surprising, very impressive that in spite of these all kinds of possible modifications into the text, whatever still has survived, it gives you, if you study it using Vijnana Buddhi, scientific acumen, logical reasoning, Tantra Shastra, Tarka Shastra in objective fashion, it leads you to very specific date. But then the question is why other peoples are coming with it, the different dates. And then the people who are really, really, I would say, novice when it comes to scientific thinking, they will say the very fact different researchers using same astronomy evidence come to different dates, therefore astronomy evidence is not reliable. It is an utterly nonsensical statement. Okay, and I'm being very euphemistic, utterly nonsensical, foolish, stupid statement, because that is not the problem. The many people who pretend to be researchers, actually, they don't start with a Mahabharata evidence. That's what I'm going to show you today. Okay, let's solve the two remaining samshayas. We will do that, and I'll tell you what happens. So, what are the two samshayas? We got this. What's the correct year of Mahabharata war? And I think with a exception of, I don't know if you have done critique of Vedvir Arya's 3162 BC, there is not much to critique. I mean, there is not much substance to begin with, but one day we will do it. I don't think I have done necessarily on 3067 on your show, but 3143 of PV Hole, I have done it. I think I have done it. If not, we will do it. And some other guest like ML Rajaji, who comes on your show, he also claims 3143. In fact, when I met him a few years ago in Delhi, that's when he was presenting it. And I said, are you aware of PV Hole? That he also came up, also meaning he came 20 years ago, and ML Raja did it like 3-4 years ago. So I said, are you aware? I mean, is that the date you are copying, or, you're doing something new? And he didn't give me any clear answer. Then I asked the next question. I said, well, what is the first day of war as per your dating claim? And again, he looked at me like, I don't know, or what's your question, or why are you asking this question? So I said, is it 13 November? And again, there was like a big surprise on his face, but he didn't comment. Why was I saying this to him? Because some 20 plus years ago, PV Hole, he was a lawyer by profession, but a wonderful astronomer based in Nagpur. He had come up with this date, and he had put this 13 November, which happens to be Kartik Amavasya, as the first day of war. So if anyone is claiming 3143 BCE and Kartik Amavasya as the first day of war, the way Emil Raja is also claiming, and I don't know how Emil Raja arrived at 3143 BCE. I mean, I don't know any basis. For example, he assumes that 3102 BC is the beginning of Kali Yuga, and we'll talk about this today also. We don't have to complete this presentation. It's a long presentation. Something very interesting. I think Emil Raja was also there at this seminar, but I did not get to listen to him. Now, I don't know what he said, but assuming that when he comes on your shows and he talks about 3102 BCE as the beginning of Kali Yuga, I'll tell you something surprising thing happened. And therefore, you want Jivan Rao on your show. With the exception of possible Emil Raja, everyone who is there, and they're talking in the 3000 BC bucket. Now, here is the fallacy par excellence. Okay, or futile objection, futility par excellence. I don't know what to say, or stupidity. Anyone who is claiming a date of Mahabharata in the 3000 BC bracket, say 3000 BC plus minus 500 years, so safely we cover like good 70 folks in this region. All of them, without exception, begin with this assumption that the Kali Yuga began in 3102 BCE. Afterwards, they may make changes to it so that theirs is something unique, and now they hope that somebody claps for them. For example, so the reason I mentioned that is, so if M.L. Raja takes 3102 BC as his starting date, then second observation of Kali Yuga beginning, second observation of Mahabharata is 36 years before Krishna's passing away is the Mahabharata war. M.L. Raja takes Kali Yuga beginning as passing away of Krishna 3102 BC. So he has to go back by 36 years. But he goes back by what? 41 years. Now, why 41 years? I think he has given as an explanation that more than 36 years. But my dear friend, if it was a more than 30, if they're using a very specific number, they're not saying more than 20 years, more than 30 years. They're saying more than 36 years. They could have said more than 40 years if it's a 41 years before. Why did they say 36? That's one problem. But other than him, if this was a hilarious moment and also a good moment, Adityaji, that Vedvir Aryaji was there, Dr. Manish Panditji was there, and D.K. Hari was there. I think D.K. Hari has been also on your show. And you know what? They all were admitting, and this should not be a surprise to anyone, that they do not accept 3102 BCE as the beginning of a Kali Yuga anymore. Okay. Now, why is this important? So as soon as they say that, the 3067 is just gone. 3067 never had a start. Okay. But look at the beauty of what is that? The Nazi fellow, he said, just keep on repeating the lie. And in the common social context, it becomes a truth. That is the story of 3067. Late Professor K.S. Raghavan, when he proposed 3067 BC in 1969, what was he doing? He was just alone fighting a recent Christian convert in India, Mr. Pillai. And this Mr. Pillai was blaspheming Mahabharata, blaspheming Krishna. And the Professor K.S. Raghavan, with limited sources, limited background, whatever his background was, he was not into science, but that doesn't matter. Somebody may not have a learned background in this, but someone may be self-learned. But he didn't have that expertise, but there was nobody else to help him. As a makeshift effort, he put forward something. And I don't know, his communication with Mr. Pillai, the recent Christian convert of that time, are there in his book, the book written by late Professor Raghavan. In fact, Adityaji, I had a pleasure of interacting with his relatives, and they were not aware of his work. Okay. And I got a copy of his book to his relatives as a memorabilia. So Professor Raghavan put forward something, and Professor Raghavan says it very clearly. Of course, the date is wrong, but he is not at least hiding behind certain things. He made a makeshift, some effort. He says it that, guys, if you want to search for Mahabharata war, you have to start with the Kali Yuga beginning. And he assumed Kali Yuga beginning to be 3102 BCE. Now, what happened? This is 1969. Some 30 years go by. Let's fast forward to 2000. And Dr. Srini Kalyan Ramanji, okay, Srini Kalyan Ramanji has done a lot of work, great work for Saraswati River context. But he's also, you will find, a very, a very stubborn fellow, in terms of once he decides something, he will not change from it. And that's perfectly fine. That is his choice. In fact, the interesting story with him is, when I was researching on Arundhati Vasishta, like from 1995 until 2009, and I forgot exactly when I contacted him, but somewhere we were communicating through email, and I would have this communication. So I told, and I have a great respect for him, by the way, notwithstanding our disagreements. So I wrote to him saying, I'm working on the Mahabharata. And he said, oh, that's great. That's great. Oh, that's phenomenal. Keep on working. And I think he has that Saraswati Research Center in Chennai, I think. And he actually connected me with his admin, his office admin. And, she was she continued to follow with me. How's the progress of my Mahabharata research? I will tell you, and today I will show you. When I 2009, 8 May 2009, when I finally demystified the most revolutionary observation of the Mahabharata text as far as the dating is concerned, the Arundhati Vasishtha. Can you imagine? The correspondence stopped. So because in that Arundhati Vasishtha observation, I could say that time that, look, this is only possible as Vasudeva has described in the Mahabharata text just before the war. It is only possible after 10,000, that time, then Siddhartha Chabra refined it in 2019, that interval, and is now more precise. But what I found with the astronomy data at that time was from 11,091 BC to 4508 BC. So I said, what this is saying beautifully, that Mahabharata war is not possible anytime after 4,500 BCE, which is not possible in last 6,500 years, which means if you look at the screen, other than 5561 BC, none of the dates are possible. And I'll tell you, the correspondence stopped. I never received a response to that email. That's what I mean by the stubbornness or a dogmatism and so on. But the point is that same Srinivas Kalyan Ramanji, some 20 years ago, I would say around 1998, 2000, had asked Professor Narari HR, late Professor Narari HR, to check if 3067 BC makes sense. Now, we have done many Purva Pakshas I have done Purva Paksha with you for 3143, for 1793. We have also done for 1478 of Professor R.N. Iyengar. We did few more dates. Now, the dates are not fresh in my mind, but we did for a few individuals, and we will do for each of these guys. So, Purva Paksha, if Professor Narari HR would have truly done Purva Paksha, he would have realized, assuming he has a background, meaning he was a professor of physics. So on the paper, yes, there is a background, but there are many folks with a background on the paper. I'm saying, assuming he had an expertise, he had an ability, capability, and he would have looked at the claim of Professor K.S. Raghavan, he would have realized that it is a disaster. He would have said, oh my God, not even a single observation from Professor Raghavan's book and its alleged connection for 3067 BC does not make sense. Instead, do you know what Professor Narari HR did? He took this as his lifelong duty to justify 3067 BC, justify by hook or crook. And in a very loyal spirit, I would say, he did it until his passing away. Notwithstanding our differences, we, with Narari HR, Professor, I'm saying, we had a communications possibly beginning, I don't know the exact date, but think of like sometime like 2006 or so, more or less the same time I started communicating with Dr. Srinivas Kalyan Ramanji. So I asked him, and Narari HR in initial days, I would say, he was very responsive. I mean, we had a good relationship. We have met at multiple conferences. He used to respond to me. Even after I published my book, which was in 2011, and I told him, I told him after that 3067 cannot be the date of Mahabharat war. In fact, it's by the way, Aditya ji, I mean, on your show, and it's a public knowledge, I would say, see, it's very difficult to decide between 10 wrong dates, which one is more wrong. I mean, there is nothing like a more wrong. If it's a wrong, it's wrong. But because 3067, just like that Kali Yuga beginning in 3102 BC, has become so much embedded, repetition of a lie in people's mind, that, everyone thinks, yeah, well, I think I've heard that date and so on. It's a disaster par excellence. In fact, we should never forget 3067 BC because it should be kept as a role model as to what not to do. So he defended it until his entire life. Okay. But the unfortunate thing about that crisis didn't stop there. Somebody would have come hopefully and said, well, no, actually we were wrong. I'll give you an example. Another example. Lokmanya Tilak. If anyone today, I get like a 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 emails and I cannot respond to them. And I'm creating something so that I won't be even seeing them and I won't be even responding to them very soon. They would have to go to my web page, okay, and interact in a certain fashion. They have to do some basic homework before even they ask the question and so on. Otherwise, the question will be ignored and so on. But my point is, anyone coming and asking, oh, I want to do research like you in astronomy or archaeoastronomy, I say, well, start with the books of Lokmanya Tilak. That much, how much in a great esteem I hold Lokmanya Tilak. Now, Lokmanya Tilak proposed 1400 BC for the Mahabharat war. And I would say, come on, it doesn't even start. We don't need to even discuss. It is such that date is such a off. There is nothing in Mahabharata that is going to take to 1400 of Lokmanya Tilak. Or 1400, the same thing claimed by Shrikant Talagiri. Lokmanya Tilak at least tried to give some justification because he was still, 100 plus years ago, 130, 140 years ago. So that Aryan invasion nonsense was there, is as a mainstream. But Shrikant Talagiri is one who actually, shown how Aryan invasion is a nonsense. But he's still today, even to this day, he sticks with 1400 BC. And if you ask for evidence, you'll not get an answer. So that dogmatism, one person may be very logical here, but that person may choose to be not logical in some other place. And I'm saying that can be true for you, Adityaji, that can be true for myself. And therefore, we have to be always remain vigilant. That's why the endurance in conduct is important, or the recitation of the absolute moral standards, like how much truth you care. Satyana labhyastapasa yeshatma samyak jnanena brahmacharya nityam samyak jnan. Why it is repetition is required. We need that self-talk to keep ourselves on the right path. Unfortunately, the disaster of 3067 BC is not over. Dr. Manish Panditji has continued to defend it. DK Hari and Hema Hariji, I don't think they understand any astronomy arguments, or if they try to make it, usually it's a humorous enough. But they are also blindly accepting this. Hey, that is their choice. That is, remember, the freedom of thought. If that makes you happy, go with it. That's fine. The reason I mentioned that is that any date that is in the 3000 BC plus minus 500 years assumes that Kali Yuga began 3102 BC. What is so surprising is that everyone at that seminar who was proposing, he was still sticking to a date which is in that 3000 BC plus minus 500 years, were forced to admit that 3102 BCE is no longer meaning in their mind also, not the beginning of a Kali Yuga. Yes. Why? Because of the great, they will not admit, they dare not admit, but because of the great research of a 25-year-old original researcher, Jivan Rao. Okay. And so he's bringing his work slowly out. Possibly it might, I don't know how many, maybe 5 books. Maybe you'll try to compress it in 1 book or 2 books or something like this. So they are already, so the very foundation that was used to arrive at this so-called 3000 BC range date, what are they doing now? So they're sticking to their date, but the very basis they used to arrive at this now is like a rug, pulling the carpet from your feet, or whatever the terminology that is used. That's what they've done. Ashok Bhatnagarji's date of 1793, we have done a very good Purva-paksha. So this is the Samshaya. For common man, like, why are there so many dates and how do I decide which one is the correct? Again, the answer is they can listen to our talks, but then they have to do their endurance in conduct. They have to do some tapasya. They have to understand that every person who claims something and puts a tilak here and smiles or something and wears a certain Indian dress is not to be trusted. Ravana came to snatch away Mata Sita Devi in a vesh of a sannyasi, Brahmin, whatever that vesh was, whatever that dress code was. So this is like a basic common sense. We have to get over this, right? Second samshaya is what was the lifespan of Krishna? Now, what do we know so far? Vishnu Puran says more than 100 years. That's all it says. Dr. P.V. Vartak had estimated this to be 101. Sri Madhvacharya says 107 in his Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnaya. Somebody took some indirect reference from the, I think it's Chandogya Upanishad, and try to connect it with Krishna's age. I don't think that makes sense, but I'm just reporting it because many people just take this blindly without doing their own research as to go back to that Chandogya Upanishad. For heaven's sake, read what is the context. People don't do that. People are lazy. So back to your first question you asked. What is the problem? What is the reason for our Indians' crisis, civilizational crisis, Indians' intellectual crisis? This is this laziness, endurance in conduct is just not understood and not followed. And then Srimad Bhagavad Puran says 125 years, but we are talking of this one Krishna. Now that is where some people say, oh no, there are multiple Krishnas. Okay, what's your evidence? Somebody said something and just goes on and on. I mean, this is like these people are not interested in getting rid of the samshaya. They are rather happy in the jugaad, happy in some confused state of mind. Okay. Now it is their choice. Remember the last one, the freedom of thought. It is their choice, but that's not the choice a intelligent person should make. Now, how not to eliminate the two samshayas? Okay, or any samshaya I'm saying. One is in the context of Krishna's lifespan and the year of Mahabharata war, by accepting multiple claims out of fear of hurting egos. So when I go around and give the presentations, and so-called academics, oh my God, I mean, just such a frustrating experience. They will talk about, say, Mahabharata dating, for example. After my presentation, they will say, oh, that was a fabulous presentation. And you and me have talked offline, Aditya ji, like, what does sometimes that means? You know, the guy is saying, hey, your lady is saying she didn't understand a damn thing about this, you know, but they will praise me. And they will say, oh yeah, you did beautiful, wonderful. And you know what? 3 years ago, I remember somebody, and they will take another name. He also had a nicer date for Mahabharata. I mean, what a joke. What do you mean? Now you have these two. That means it should create a samshaya in your mind and say, you know what? Either both of these are wrong or one of them is right. But our Indian intellectual minds, so-called intellectual minds, because ordinary people are much more smarter, I'll tell you, are in such a confusion, in such a crisis that they forget knowing astronomy, forget knowing Sanskrit, forget knowing scientific acumen, forget knowing how to bring it together, forget knowing method of logical science, logic of scientific method. Forget all of this. It's very frustrating. They will not even understand that for a one historical event, you have 5 different dates. You just don't say, oh, this is good, this is good, this is good, this is good. It's not like going to a sweet shop and saying, oh, that also looks attractive, that also looks attractive, that also looks attractive. No, in sweet shop, that makes sense. Not when you have a one historical event and there are 5 different claims separated by millenniums. It should raise the samshaya in you, the samshaya of a buddhi, not the samshaya of a mind that many archaeologists have. They said, therefore, this cannot be trusted. Arey, bhai, archaeologist guy, you have not come out of your cocoon. Archaeology has gone way ahead. You are still stuck into the nonsense of logical positivism of 100-year-old, which has been debunked on every single count. So one thing is, we should not hesitate from studying it and even asserting to the best of your knowledge. You may be even wrong. So, for example, by accepting a multiple claims out of fear of hurting egos. See, when I run into Indic researchers, and they will just talk pleasantly to me. And I said, okay, so have you, the Mahabharata dating subject will come. So is Ramayana. And say, so, okay, have you read my book? And have you reached a conclusion? I have yet to meet someone we can say in public domain, a researcher, which is considered, say, pro-Indic researcher. Forget the anti-Indic. We are not talking about that. Who will say, yes, I studied these 5 different claims, and I will not say, Nilesh ji, yours is the final word, because, by the way, I don't say that mine is the final word. Okay. The point is, but yours is by miles and by thousands of miles, yours is the best of all that I have read. I have not come across even a single researcher. Okay. Those are all well-known names. Dare say that. So what are the possibilities? Again, goes back to our crisis. Our crisis is they may not understand this basic principle of a samyak jnana, that if it's a one historical event and there are multiple dates, they all can be wrong, of course, that is given. But most of the time, if not all the time, majority of the times, it is possible to look at the two claims and say which one is better. You can have a very independent samyak criteria to do this. They dare not. And do you think it is sometimes because, I mean, it can be because of they don't have a knowledge of astronomy, they don't have a knowledge of scientific method, they may not have a knowledge of Sanskrit. I mean, all of these possibilities. But most of the time, I would say from my personal experience that they do not have guts. That is the problem. Okay. So what they worry, if they pick one particular claim, then they think everyone else is their enemy. And they will rather be in a goody-goody relationship with everyone, the jatra, the festival, just chalta rahe. But our civilization, if it gets stagnant, so what? They are not going after satyena labhyas tapasa yeshatma samyak jnanena brahmacharya nityam. No, the jugad is good. Like many times when people hold conferences, Aditya, this is my experience of last 5-6 years since end of 2016. People are happy that they had a conference. I mean, that itself they think is the end result. The final outcome is that they had a conference. They are very happy. Oh, very nice. They met each other. No, of course, those are all good aspects of a conference. That's why we meet. But the conference is there to resolve certain issues, eliminate the doubts, and move on. No, hardly anyone is interested. Hardly anyone is interested. And therefore, Ashwini and I decided, as we will avoid conferences, will not go to the conferences. I mean, I get invitations all the time. This one I went because, it was organized by IGNCA and Bhandarkar Oriental and many things that not everything I can disclose necessarily. So people worry of hurting egos. Well, if somebody, there is a concept of ahankar, one thing is like the feeling of a self, like I exist, Swarthanuman is good to comprehending. But ahankar, in the sense of a false ego, it deserves to be hurt. In fact, it deserves to be eliminated, So let's not worry about that. Also, how not to eliminate the two samshayas? By falling for what looks scientific. Everyone can use the word scientific. Even I use it. In fact, if you ask me, I would prefer not to use the word scientific, because it's like saying, if you're not going to do scientifically, then how are you going to do it? Or why would anybody will do it? Or why anyone should be interested in such nonsense? Okay. Now, remember the last episode that we did, the definition given by my good friend, Mr. Fadke, Adhyatma, is like a purifying science. Purifying Vijnana is Adhyatma. And it is such a beautiful relationship in the Indian Dharma civilization that you don't find anywhere else. And what is a Vijnana or what is a science is a purified Adhyatma. Okay, the science begins with the myths and critical analysis of the myths. Why myths? Because something that we cannot prove. The myth doesn't mean Mahabharata and Ramayana. No, they are rather history. But Alexander is a myth because there is no evidence. But even when there is no evidence of any kind, any archaeology, any empirical evidence, we may still go by the text and try to see if we can make some sense out of it. Okay. So my point is, if you're not going to do it scientific, how are you going to do it? But therefore, there is other problem, which is somebody may say he did something or she did something scientific. People say, yeah, but he was saying he did scientifically. My dear fool, why do you listen to someone? These same people who will our Indian people, and I'm talking of Indian crisis, who will casually accept such kind of nonsense when it comes to say Mahabharata, Ramayana, Itihas, and so on. They will not accept such casual claim, casual promise, if it has to do with their own money, with their own job, with their own family, with their own house. No, there they are smart. But our Indian folks, I'm talking majority of us, have an extremely careless and casual attitude when it comes to the aspect of our civilization. There we are like, yaar chalta hai, yeah, whatever goes, anything goes, just dance, Holi, right? So greetings to everyone on the day of a Holi. Arey, aaj Holi hai, just dance karo. Now, celebration is important. I'm not countering that, or I'm not saying anything against it. but everything has its place. So japa, tapa, dhyana, swadhyaya. So everything has its place and everything should be done in some amount. We have literally given away to reading of our Shastra, to trying to understand. And then you know what, Aditya, just suddenly happens as soon as I would say that, oh, so where can I start studying Sanskrit? I mean, anyone who asks that question is basically not qualified to do this. The person, I mean, in these days, guys, with everyone with a smartphone, and you have to ask where you would start studying Sanskrit. Where would I get your books? I mean, such a irritating question. Just type the name. Amazon is going to show up, Subbo publication is going to show up. So that's the problem. Easily falling for this, but being utterly lazy. People don't understand endurance in conduct. People think they are entitled to all of this. People should supply ready stuff to them. People should spoon feed. No, that's the problem. Therefore, they cannot distinguish between what is truly scientific versus what is pretentiously scientific. If you ask, and we'll stop on this one, we might have to do a few sessions on this, Aditya. If you look at these two pictures, so let me ask you, which one, I mean, again, this is not a test of you, which one looks more scientific, just prima facie?
Left.
Left, right? Some engineering drawings and design and so on. And I'm saying it's not that it's not scientific, it is scientific. But people will say, oh, I don't understand. What is that? First thing, some looks like a clock, looks like a circle, looks like some tank. I don't know, maybe nuclear reactor. Well, it's a coffee machine patent, on the other hand, WhatsApp, and not many people will think it's something very scientific. They say, well, what is it? And I'm not a scientist, but I can use the WhatsApp. That's how people think. But the reality is the simple can be highly complex in a sophisticated way. So on the left side is what you use. You just say, hey, hello, how are you? But every time you type that, in the background, a lot more is happening in terms of taking it to that person, storing it, and so on and so forth. Again, this is just a computing science kind of thing I'm talking, but a lot can be complex. Okay, so we will stop on this. Just two more things. So if you hear somebody here's a statement, as we know, there are everyone knows there are 364 pieces of evidence in astronomy, for astronomy in Mahabharata. And now because the person doesn't know, he or she doesn't know what to respond, say yes or say no. Well, if you don't know, you say, I don't know. Okay. Now, of course, this is a wrong statement. There are no 364 pieces of evidence, at least that I'm aware of. There can be. Now, take the statement like Aryan did not migrate to India. Okay, now those people who have some common sense, done some scientific study, they know it. But mainstream with a couple of degrees, people of Indian origin settle in America. Okay, some of my classmates, sometimes they ask out of ignorance, sometimes they ask to irritate me. And what nonsense. I mean, they are just so away from the civilizational crisis that we are going through. One of my friends would say, oh, so you're saying that Aryan they did not come? Of course, he was doing to irritate me. And I stopped talking to that fellow. I said, I don't have a time for investing, for such a stupid comment. The point is, Aryans did not migrate to India, but if you go around in the libraries, the whole Western libraries and their lackeys in India, everywhere, even Indian textbook, for heaven's sake, they are still talking of this stupidity of Aryan invasion theory. Okay, so according to the world opinion, consensus, the statement above is not true, although that is a truth statement. Okay, so we'll stop here. Let's not take for granted what we know or what we don't know or would like to believe. It's perfectly okay to say, I don't know. That is a good starting point, for this. The only reliable way to remove samshaya is to test and is to verify itself. It is to triangulate the Guru Pratiti, Atma Pratiti, Shastra Pratiti. How do you get Atma Pratiti? By studying it yourself, by exposing those claims to Indriya Pramanya. Trust but verify, have Shraddha but verify. And on this, we will stop. This is Aditya ji, we'll stop, and exactly we will start on this slide next time. This is the magical doubt clearing machine, okay, DCM. And many people have seen this in a different form. You from one side, just like is the Rahul Gandhi Congress president still? Like he says, from one side you put the aloo and other side you take out the gold, right? So this is a machine like that, but not of the Congress kind. Okay, well, you on one side you put the tough problems inside, and only if you are willing to work, and only if you follow this method, and if you are lucky, Daivam Chavatra Panchamam, you can be lucky to have a scientific and logical solution on the other side. So this is where we will stop for today, and we will continue with this series next time.
Just like most of the American government officials are saying, by putting more weapons in Ukraine, they'll get peace.
Right, right.
No, you mentioned very good thing about that. I'm studying Sanskrit to understand our Shastra. And so they're going to spend 10 years in studying Sanskrit. So Shastra is still behind. Sanskrit is
Yeah.
just a language.
Yeah.
And then after they spend 10 years, by that time, if somebody starts at 40, they'll be 50.
Yeah.
Senses are going to be weak. And the eyes cannot see that much. The mind is not stable. The body has more diseases. I mean, luckily, if you maintain healthy lifestyle, you won't get it. But there is no time left.
Correct.
And the simple concept is read and repeat, read and repeat, read and repeat. Otherwise, like I'll tell you honestly about me, if I don't remember, because I forget so many shloka, what shloka I used to remember at 25, now I remember less.
Yes.
But I know where it is. I can go look at it. But
Right.
if you just get into that long bandwagon of first learning Sanskrit and then understanding, then you'll suddenly find out Sanskrit which you learned was very Prakrit, was neither Mahabharat nor Ramayana. So level
Yeah.
Sanskrit.
Yes. It's like saying, I'm going to learn Italian and Latin to understand Copernicus and Galileo.
That's right.
Okay. This is not to take away anyone's interest if they want to learn Latin or Italian or Sanskrit. Now, Sanskrit is such a scientific formulation that it has its advantages, but that has nothing to do with understanding Mahabharata or understanding Ramayana.
That's right. That's right.
In fact, more often, not everyone, but more often, I run into Sanskrit people who know Sanskrit grammar, okay, or some other aspect like Sanskrit Darshana also, by the way, not just limiting to grammar, Darshana also, where they know the whole Darshana text by heart, okay, but ask them how they apply it, and they're a disaster par excellence.
Exactly.
Okay. So, for example, like when I will quote something, they say, yes, this is a darshana, don't use it for science. I'm saying darshana is a science, indriya pramanya.
That's right. And one more, you mentioned some very good points. I also, when people ask me questions about that where it is written in Mahabharata, now sometimes we don't remember.
Yeah.
I cannot give you a quote, but then I'll have to search it and I can find it out for you.
Correct.
But even better would be that you search it out with your turn your pages. If you have in a book, if you don't have it, go to Gita Press, get a whole copy of Mahabharata and read it. And if you have doubts, then you come and ask question. Then it is easy for me to go back to that reference. Like for example, people say Uttarakhand is not bona fide for many reasons. They say. My question to them is very simple. Valmiki wrote 24,000 shloka, 500 sarga, 7 kanda. If you remove Uttarakhand, there are only 6 left. That means 18,000 shloka left. Yeah. What happened to the 6,000 shloka?
Yes.
So you have to check on all those areas and then you come up with that. Even Bhagavad Gita, Vaishampayan says 745 shloka if you add everything what he says. But 700 are available. Yeah. And remaining 45, if you are, but these 700, at least these 700 you should read, not wait for those 45. But when you spread that logic that, okay, it is scriptures have been modified, Bhagavad Gita is not complete, then you will not get benefit. Like even if you have 3/4 of a katori of kheer, still you're getting into kheer.
Yeah, these are excuses. These are excuses for people. Just like they say, when I retire, I'm going to start studying Bhagavad Gita. And I say, good luck. So
there is a very common joke. People ask, what do you do after retirement? I'll go to the Hawaii. I'll go there. I'll live in Vrindavan.
Yeah.
And I'll stay there. Do it now. What is stopping you? If on retirement you can do it now.
Yeah, that's a list of excuses. I mean, again, everyone has a different circumstances. We are not talking about this, but yeah, I mean, we say again, Aditya, all you and me can do is bring it to people's knowledge. Again, we don't bring this out of our frustration, although we may talk of a crisis. For us, we are in the joy, like Rasraj Prabhu, if he's, sometime I was asking him, and like the irritating folks today in the Indic space that I see researchers, they were also there in the Bhakti space. I'll tell you, this is going back
Yeah.
35 plus years I'm talking. Okay. And so I asked him, like, so the person is like, looks like a bhakta, but a most irritating fella, most idiotic fella, I'm telling you. He says, what is that? I mean, why is that? He says, well, everyone is on their evolutionary path,
Evolutionary path. Yeah.
right? And then he said, what if, he said, if you are in, this is my association with the Hare Krishna there in the Mumbai, I'm saying, Rasraj Prabhu, Dr. Ravi Gomatam. He said, if you are in Hare Krishna, in the sense of Krishna consciousness, he was saying, in the Krishna Bhakti mode, the rest of the world may not be in a Krishna Bhakti mode, but if you are in the Krishna Bhakti mode, you will be happy. You will be joyous, happy in the not sense of general happy, the joyous, the Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, that Prasannatma, na shochati na kankshati. On the other hand, if you are not in this Krishna Bhakti and the rest of the world is in Krishna Bhakti, you will be still miserable. The reason I just bring that up is when Adityaji and myself, we just discuss it for the benefit of audience, and we will say these things. We are not saying this out of frustration. Okay, we are saying this with the intention that somebody takes it seriously and does something about it.
That's right. That's right. Also, you said very good point. I'll end the talk here. Maya Das, Sadao Das, Krishna Das, Bindas. That's a
that you said it. Say that again. What is that?
Maya Das, Sadao Das, Krishna Das, Bindas.
There you go. I love it.
So just be happy, enjoy, and just read. And if you have questions, you can always come back to us. Question over here on the comments here. And also, like Nileshji said, ask qualified question, do your own swadhyaya. Understand the whole presentation, and then you ask the question. And there are 74 presentations of Nileshji. There's a whole playlist, Nilesh Oak 5561 BC. You can forward it, you can read it. There's so many topics over the last 2 years. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening, and do comment. Namaste.
Namaskar.